Picture this. It's 2022, and the world tries to pull off something completely unprecedented. Western powers essentially attempted to choke a nuclear-armed state completely out of the global financial system. We're talking trillions in trade flows that were supposed to grind to a devastating absolute halt. Banks severed, reserves frozen. The ultimate financial siege was on. But they didn't stop. Because somewhere in the shadows, a new network quietly came online. A parallel underworld of banks, shell companies, and backdoor payment systems perfectly built to profit from the panic. In this explainer, we are following the money straight into the dark.
So that brings us to the big central mystery we're unraveling today. Seriously, if the major banks were cut off, why is the money still flowing? How exactly is a parallel financial underworld operating right under the noses of Western regulators? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden mechanisms keeping this massive system alive and kicking.
Okay, let's dive into this. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the West basically reached for its heaviest economic artillery. First up, banks linked to Moscow were abruptly unplugged from SWIFT. Second, massive foreign reserves were frozen solid. And third, brutal export bans on high-tech trade were dropped. On paper, it was an elegant, flawless siege. Isolate the currency, freeze the assets, and watch the economy spiral. But as we're going to see, reality is rarely that clean.
See, the global economy is deeply addicted to Russia's oil, gas, metals, and grain. And well, addiction always finds a dealer. Publicly, the Russian economy looked boxed in. But privately, fueled by this massive global reliance, a completely parallel map of the world was quietly being drawn.
Which brings us to Section 1, the blueprint, the actual birth of this shadow network. Imagine waking up and suddenly your country's major banks are just toxic, but your oil still immensely valuable. What do? Well, you build a shadow network. It isn't a clean, official system. It's a messy, parallel structure made entirely of smaller, unsanctioned banks that can still access foreign currencies, friendly states willing to just look the other way, and offshore shell companies. You don't send money from a sanctioned Moscow bank anymore. You route it through obscure, newly minted trade firms in places like Dubai or Hong Kong.
All right, Section 2, the mechanics. Literally, how to bypass a sanction.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it operates almost like a massive, coordinated heist. Based strictly on the data investigators have pieced together, there are 4 main steps to bypassing a global financial siege. We've got the front, the payment chain, the cargo game, and finally, crypto and cash. Let's break these down step by step. Step 1 is the front. Say a Russian company desperately needs restricted dual-use tech, right, like microchips. Buying directly is totally banned, so they use a cutout. Newly created trading firms are spun up overnight in hubs like Turkey, the UAE, or Central Asia. The paperwork gets scrubbed clean, usually claiming the shipment is just harmless consumer electronics. On paper, it's perfectly innocent. In reality, it's a total ghost. Next up, step 2, the payment chain. You obviously can't just wire dollars, so the money does this really complex dance. Rubles are moved to a local broker, who uses smaller, obscure banks to quietly convert those funds into euros, dirhams, or yuan. The money often ping-pongs through 3 to 5 different international banks. Every single hop shaves off a fee, sure, but it completely washes the origin of the funds, creating this impenetrable layer of plausible deniability. Then we hit step 3, the cargo game. The front company orders the goods using that freshly cleaned money, but the shipment doesn't go straight to Russia. No way. It's routed through free trade zones with super lax customs. Containers are literally relabeled mid-transit. Ownership shifts on paper while the ship is literally out at sea. By the time that box of restricted spare parts finally crosses the border, its true journey is a phantom.
And finally, step 4. When traditional banks get too terrified of regulators, things move to the greasier layers. We're talking over and under invoicing, where they declare one price on paper while moving the extra value completely off book. They use offshore stablecoin crypto networks to settle things totally anonymously, and they even rely on ancient informal cash Hawala systems in border cities. It's dirty, it adds friction, but it absolutely guarantees the deal goes through.
This leads us to Section 3, moving the lifeblood. Enter the ghost fleet.
Smuggling microchips in a box is one thing, right? But to move the multi-billion-dollar lifeblood of the Russian state budget, oil, you need a massive physical operation at sea. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the workaround. Old tankers are quietly transferred to obscure shell firms, sailing under small nation flags of convenience. Then, in key geographic choke points, their tracking transponders mysteriously just go dark, Millions of barrels are transferred ship to ship out in international waters. The cargo is mixed up and payments are laundered through secrecy jurisdictions.
So, looking at all this, we get to Section 4, the Grand Conspiracy, the idea that they planned it all.
It is so tempting to look at the sheer scale of this operation and see a cartel illusion. A flawless Bond villain-style master plan. Kremlin strategists mapping out offshore havens years in advance. Spies nudging complicit global bankers. It paints this terrifying picture where public sanctions are just theater and the real script of global finance is written in private, smoke-filled back rooms.
But wait, Section 5, pulling back the curtain. Let's look at the messy reality. Here is the major twist of this whole explainer. That flawless, omniscient master plan, it's completely an illusion. When investigators actually look at the data, the coordinated global cartel just vanishes. The reality is actually a fragmented, frantic, highly improvised system of high-risk workarounds. It's constantly mutating. Schemes collapse. Panicked banks cut ties overnight. It is absolutely not a master plan. It's a desperate, messy scramble to survive immense pressure. And honestly, hiding in the shadows is brutally expensive. Every single clandestine step, it requires massive friction fees. There is this terrifying dependency on fickle middlemen who might flip or get sanctioned themselves tomorrow. Front companies are constantly getting burned, blacklisted, and have to be replaced in a relentless, exhausting arms race against Western surveillance. So, the crucial point is in Section 6, the human incentive machine. It's about chaos, not control. If there isn't some evil genius pulling the strings, what is actually building this network? Well, it's just basic primal human incentives. Russia needs to sell energy and buy tech just to survive. Shadow traders see restricted markets and want to harvest massive profit premiums. Banks, they want lucrative transaction fees with plausible deniability. And third country states just want geopolitical leverage and dirt-cheap energy. These converging selfish incentives organically piece the network together. It's pure chaos, not control. This brings us to a really fascinating, nuanced takeaway. Sanctions are undeniably powerful. They raise costs and absolutely strain economies. But they are incredibly porous. The exact same open, interconnected financial architecture that made globalized trade so amazingly efficient over the last 30 years. It also makes rerouting illicit flows incredibly easy. The system's greatest strength is actually its ultimate vulnerability. So how do we actually stop it? You can't just yell, "Sanction Moscow harder." It requires agonizingly slow, deeply technical work. We're talking tightening re-export controls in third country hubs, aggressively cracking down on shell company secrecy, deepening global financial intelligence coordination. It completely lacks the cinematic glamour of a spy thriller, but it really is the only actual way to dismantle the machine.
We'll end on this thought. The world runs on hidden systems. When you see how easily the global financial architecture can be hijacked by overlapping human incentives, you kind of have to ask yourself, who really controls the global economy? It's messy, it's dangerous, and it's highly adaptable. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If this helped pull back the curtain on the illusions of global finance for you, keep questioning the clean narratives and keep learning.